Bitcoin looks ready to pump. Let me show you guys my brand new long and buy position. Okay, so on Tuesday's YouTube video, we could see that I entered this Bitcoin long right over here. On Tuesday's YouTube video, I also explained to you guys that I was expecting a sweep of this low over here. Now, why was I expecting a sweep of that low? Because we were swing failing the high right over here. And because we were swing failing the high over here, we were engineering plenty of liquidity over here. And I expected a sweep of the liquidity before a bounce would follow. Now we are seeing this bounce on Bitcoin. And guys, I'm looking to add another long position to the current long position that I'm holding already, as explained on Tuesday's YouTube video. Now, why? Because when we look at the 1 hourly time frame and we go ahead and we analyze the structure over here, there's a few things that I'm noticing. The move that brought us to this sweep over here of this high, that swing failure, was this local structure over here. Now, this local structure over here had a fake break of structure over here. Why was this a fake break of structure? Because this high that we broke through was an insignificant high to break. Why was it an insignificant high to break? Because the high over here only brought us to a higher low over here and not to a lower low, and therefore it carried no significance, and this move over here was a fake break of structure. Now, that fake break of structure, as we know, is then engineering plenty of liquidity beneath the low right over here. And as soon as we swept the liquidity over here, I slowly but surely started to become interested in longs on Bitcoin. How so? Because once we sweep the liquidity over here, the low that sweeps that liquidity, aka this low over here, carries a lot of significance. Now, after we put in this low, this significant low, remember this term, guys, there's a difference between a significant low that brings us to a high and a normal low that brings us to a high. This significant low over here brought us to this lower high, and then this lower high brought us to this lower low. We know that if a high brings us to a lower low compared to the low that brought us to that high, it becomes a significant high to break. Now, we are marking out a significant break over here. But why was this high so significant to break? Why is this such a high probability break of structure?
Did you know that Keton is one of the oldest trading ports? Speaking of trading, make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on any of my trading related updates.
That we are currently looking at for the price of Bitcoin, it is due to two reasons. The first reason being is the fact that the low over here that brought us to this high was a significant low because it swept a lot of liquidity beneath this internal low over here, a valid liquidity pool. The second reason why this high is so significant to break and why this break of structure over here carries a high probability, in my opinion, was the fact that this high over here swept this high. So it swept a lot of liquidity, and after sweeping that liquidity, then we got a very strong and impulsive move to the downside, okay? So the high swept liquidity before it got an impulse to the downside, and also the low that brought us to this high swept liquidity before it got us to that high, and therefore it carried a lot of significance. And therefore, this is not only a valid break of structure, but also a high probability break of structure. Now, before we made a break of structure, we swept a high time frame liquidity pool over here as well, which in my opinion means that Bitcoin is finding a new invalidation for our bullish bias and for our bullish thesis. First, the invalidation for my bullish thesis was beneath the low over here. Now I can move the bullish invalidation to the low right over here, which means that we can start looking for new long positions on Bitcoin because we have found ourselves a tighter invalidation. Also, guys, we can see that we put in a weekly low for Bitcoin on Tuesday, as I have marked out over here, the P1 for the week. Now we can also see that we put in the P2 tonight, overnight on a Thursday, which means that based off the timing where we put in the weekly P1, the weekly P1, aka the current weekly low for Bitcoin, already has a 65.9% chance to hold, and the weekly P2, aka the current weekly high for Bitcoin, only has a 19% chance to hold. Now, we also put in the weekly P1 during the New York session, and we can see that when we look at the graph over here, that most often we put in the weekly P1 during the New York session, which higher the probability even more based off the timing where we put in the weekly low for the weekly low to hold. So I would say instead of 65.9%, I would say the weekly low has around a 75% chance to hold based off the weekly timing. Now we can also see that we put in a weekly P2 during the Asia session overnight, which means that when we look at the graph over here, we can see that Asia is a very rare session to put in the weekly P2 for the week, which means that this probability is not 19% in my opinion. It lays around 15%, which means that based off weekly timing, this low has around a 75% chance to hold and the current weekly high is around a 15% chance to hold. So guys, it is very likely to make new weekly highs today, but most often we put in a weekly high either on Friday or on Sunday, which means that we can expect higher prices for Bitcoin during the remainder of this week, which we can obviously use for our potential long position. Now this metric over here is super interesting to me as well, because we can see it showcases a 97.4% chance to get a bigger move compared to the current move that we have seen so far this week on Bitcoin, which basically means that there's almost a 100% chance to get a bigger move compared to this current move that we have seen so far this week on Bitcoin, which means that it is very likely, guys, based off both weekly timing and weekly distance statistics, to make new weekly highs for the remainder of the week, which means that if we get a pullback, you should be looking for longs, which means that our buys in general, not only based off market structure and liquidity, but also based off statistics, should be bullish for the price of Bitcoin. Now, before we map out the new long position for Bitcoin, we first have to determine our target. The first target is this high over here. Guys, we can see that this is obviously a significant high, but we always want to use the second to highest high, in this case the high over here. Now over here, obviously the all-time high is a very significant high as well. So once again, we are going to use the second to highest high compared to the all-time high, aka the highs over here, as our second take profit target. Now if we currently enter a market position, long position right over here for Bitcoin, with the invalidation beneath the low right over here, and we target our main draw on liquidity, aka the high over here, we can see that we get a beautiful RR of approximately 2.78.